This video is about German innovations that turned the tide of battle. Subscribe for more. The sun hung low in the sky over the lush fields of northern France, casting long shadows over the remnants of World War I's trenches. It was 1918, and the Great War had reached a fever pitch. The familiar stench of gunpowder mixed with the earthy smell of damp soil as men in mud-caked uniforms prepared for battle. Among them, Corporal Wilhelm Brandt stood at the edge of the trench, his heart pounding fiercely as he grasped the wooden stock of his Gewehr 98 rifle. Brandt wasn't just an ordinary soldier. He was part of an elite, experimental unit known for field testing the latest military innovations birthed from Germany's frantic race to outsmart its enemies. With the Allies gaining ground and the war's end on the horizon, every battle was paramount. Rumors circulated that the High Command was developing a new weapon, one that could shift the balance of power on the battlefield. Across the trench, Private Hans Emmerle, Brandt's childhood friend, tightened the straps of his helmet, the weight of apprehension evident on his face. "Do you think we'll see it today?" he asked, shielding his eyes from the sun while glancing toward the murky horizon. Brandt shrugged, anxiety knotting his stomach. They had witnessed countless innovations, the flamethrower, the tank, but none had decisively turned the tide as the war dragged on. The Allies, too, were relentless, pushing forward with their own advancements. Further down the trench, Lieutenant Armin Schneider barked orders, his sharp eyes scanning the field. "Get ready. Intelligence suggests a full-scale attack. Our new artillery piece is finally operational, and we will use it to break their lines." He held up a map, strategy sketched in hasty ink. The men nodded, adrenaline coursing through them as they prepared for the imminent clash. Brandt exchanged a determined glance with Emmerle, a silent promise to protect one another. But deep inside, a question loomed: would this new weapon be the answer they had been searching for, or just another illusion? As the sun dipped lower, its fiery glow was interrupted by the rumble of approaching artillery. The sound sent a shiver down Brandt's spine. The air was thick with tension as soldiers readied their positions. In that moment, as time stretched thin, the first artillery round screamed overhead, a prelude to chaos. The battlefield erupted with a cacophony of noise, explosions, cries of the wounded, and the relentless roar of machine guns. German forces surged forward, Brandt and Emmerle at the forefront, pushing through mud and debris. Brandt's heart raced. He felt alive yet terrified, a sensation that coursed through his veins like wildfire. Despite the confusion, Brandt's mind was focused. Suddenly, from the smoke and dust, a massive shape emerged, the prototype of Germany's new weapon, a reinforced tank called the Sturmpanzer. It rolled forward, its armored shell gleaming ominously as it unleashed a barrage of firepower. The sight was mesmerizing and horrifying. Brandt could see the fear in the eyes of enemy soldiers as they scrambled to prepare their defenses. Stray bullets whizzed past, ricocheting off the tank's surface. Brandt tightened his grip, feeling the weight of history pressing down upon him. The Sturmpanzer was more than a machine, it was a beacon of hope for a nation on the brink of despair. "Charge!" shouted Schneider, his voice cutting through the din. Brandt and Emmerle pushed forward, flanking the tank, their rifles at the ready. The ground trembled beneath their boots as they advanced, the Sturmpanzer in the lead, a relentless force carving a path through the enemy lines. But in the chaos of battle, doubt crept into Brandt's mind. What if this innovation wasn't enough? What if the Allies had their own secrets? As if answering his unspoken fears, a flash of movement caught his eye amid the smoke. A squadron of British tanks thundered into view, their presence a dark omen. Brandt's heart sank. The Allies had also developed their own armored vehicles, and they were not standing idly by. The battlefield had become a deadly chess game, and both sides possessed potent pieces. As the two forces collided, bodies fell, and smoke enveloped the field, obscuring the line between friend and foe. In the midst of the carnage, Brandt saw Emmerle take a hit, a spray of crimson marking the mud. Brandt shouted, instinctively diving toward his friend. Brandt pulled Emmerle back into cover, but the pain etched on Emmerle's face told him all he needed to know. "Stay with me, Hans. Help is coming." But help was slow. The relentless din of battle drowned out Brandt's voice as he pressed his hands against Emmerle's wound, a futile attempt to stem the flow of blood. The Sturmpanzer roared past, a fleeting symbol of their hopes. Yet the tide of battle surged on, relentless and uncaring. The conflict deepened, and just as Brandt thought the chaos could not escalate further, a piercing whistle cut through the air. A new German innovation, a chemical weapon, was being unleashed. Green clouds billowed across the field, a sinister harbinger of destruction. The wind shifted, and Brandt felt the sting of the gas in his throat. "Get down," he shouted, dragging Emlila further back as the enemy faltered, confusion washing over them. The gas had turned the landscape into a hellscape, but in that moment of chaos, Brant's resolve ignited. They had to push forward, they had to seize the chance, or all would be lost. The battle raged on, and as Brant fought through the haze of gas and fear, he couldn't shake the nagging thought that these innovations could ultimately be their undoing. His mind raced with strategies, countermeasures, and the weight of untold histories. Just when it seemed the chaos would engulf him, a thunderous roar echoed across the battlefield. The Allied forces had deployed their own secret weapon, a prototype of the British tank, the Mach V, lumbering into view. The sight struck fear into Brant's heart. The tide of battle was shifting once more, and the question loomed large: who would stand victorious when the dust settled? As the stern pans met the Mach V in a violent clash, the ground shook beneath them. Brant looked to Emlila, whose eyes were filled with pain and uncertainty. "We can't give up, Wilhelm. Not now," he gasped, summoning every ounce of strength. Brant nodded, determination igniting within him. The two soldiers pushed forward, daring to hope that the innovations they fought for would save them from despair. Little did they know, the battle was only a prelude, a mere chapter in a grand story that spanned continents. As dusk fell over the battlefield, Brant and Emlila found themselves encircled by chaos, yet the fight was far from over. Innovations had changed the dynamics of warfare, but the true test lay ahead. Would they emerge from the ashes or be swallowed by the relentless machine of history? The answer lingered tantalizingly in the wind, beckoning them toward a fate intertwined with the fate of nations. The horizon glimmered with the promise of the next chapter, one that would echo across the decades and lead to even greater wars, forever altering the course of history. With one last push, Brant vowed to fight not only for his friend, but for a future defined by resilience, igniting a fire that would resonate deep into the heart of Europe. The battle had only begun. As night crept in and the shadows embraced the field, Brant heard the distant rumble of another storm brewing on the horizon, one that would ripple across time, connecting the threads of innovation and warfare that changed the very fabric of society. What lay ahead was a mystery yet to unfold, a tapestry of alliances, betrayals, and the relentless march of technology that would stretch far beyond the fields of France. The next battle awaited them, a battle that would span generations, leaving scars and stories in its wake. The world was on the brink of transformation, and as Brant braced himself for the inevitable clash, he knew one truth: the journey was far from over, and the innovations of war were just beginning to reveal their true power. A new conflict beckoned, one that would bind the fates of nations together, igniting a legacy that would forever change the landscape of warfare. The stage was set, and the heart of Europe awaited the next act in this eternal cycle of battle. The air thickened with acrid smoke as the battle raged on, drowning out the sounds of the wounded and dying. Corporal Wilhelm Brant pressed against the cold earth beside Private Hans Emlila, his mind racing with thoughts of survival. The battlefield was a cacophony of chaos, and yet, amid the violence, Brant could not shake the feeling of inevitability. This war, with its innovations and horrors, was merely a precursor to something far greater. Through the haze of the chemical gas, Brant could see the Sturmpanzer firing relentlessly at the British positions, but the Mark V tank stood its ground, returning fire with a ferocity that mirrored their own desperation. "We need to flank them," shouted Lieutenant Schneider, rallying the men around him. Brant, feeling the weight of Emlila's injury pressing on his heart, made the decision in a split second. "Stay here, Hans. I'll get us cover," Brant urged, scanning the battlefield for anything that could provide a moment of shelter. Emlila grimaced but nodded, his trust unyielding even in pain. With a surge of determination, Brant sprinted toward a fallen tree that had shielded several soldiers earlier in the skirmish. Each step felt like running through quicksand, the very ground beneath him a reminder of the lives already lost. As he reached the tree, a deafening explosion rocked the earth, sending him sprawling to the side. Brant regained his footing, heart pounding, and glanced back to check on Emlila. His friend was still alive, but the urgency of the situation pressed heavily on Brant's shoulders. He crouched behind the tree and raised his rifle, his eyes narrowing as he targeted an enemy machine gun nest, the source of the relentless fire. With a series of calculated breaths, he fired off several rounds, each shot a desperate plea for his friend's safety. The gunner fell silent, and Brant felt a flicker of hope, but the noise of the battle was unrelenting, and the chaos continued to swirl around them. He peered back at Emlila, whose face was pale but determined. "I am fine, Wilhelm. Just get us under cover," Emlila shouted, gritting his teeth through the pain. Brant nodded and made a split-second decision. He would not only fight for himself and Emlila, he would also fight for the innovations that Germany had put so much stock into. If the Sturmpanzer was to lead them to victory, they would need to support that advance with their own flesh and blood. He turned back to the fray, bolstered by the thought of proving that their innovations were more than just metal machines, they were the embodiment of hope. As Brandt maneuvered, he could see the British forces regrouping. Their own troops were emerging, ready to counterattack, but there was no time to dwell on that. The Sturmpanzer loomed ahead, firing again, its powerful cannon sending shockwaves through the air. Brandt felt the vibrations in his chest as he sprinted forward. "Cover me," he yelled to Schneider, who was rallying a small band of men. They fired their rifles in unison as Brandt dashed toward the Sturmpanzer. As he neared it, a figure emerged from the hatch, a German soldier, eyes wild with adrenaline. "Get inside. We need more men to drive this beast," he shouted. Without hesitation, Brandt climbed the tank's side, feeling the warmth of the metal under his hands. Inside, the noise was deafening, a whirlwind of orders and the rhythmic thud of shells being loaded. He quickly joined the crew, the weight of responsibility settling over him like a heavy cloak. "What is the situation?" he barked, his voice cutting through the din. "We're pushing the line, but we need to break through their defenses. We've lost too many men," the tank commander shouted back, sweat glistening on his brow. Brandt nodded, his heart racing. He took a position, loading shells as the commander shouted for a forward advance. With a rumble that vibrated through his bones, the Sturmpanzer lunged forward, its massive treads crushing anything in its path. As they barreled towards the enemy, Brandt's adrenaline surged. The cannon roared, spewing fire as they targeted the British positions. The explosion tore apart the earth, sending debris flying. Each shot they fired was a testament to the power of German innovation, a weapon not merely created to kill, but to instill fear and assert dominance on the battlefield. "We're almost through," the commander yelled, sweat pouring down his face. Brandt could feel the thrill of impending victory, but it was quickly tempered by the reality of the war. In his mind, visions of home and the promise of peace flickered like a distant candle. He fought against the tide of despair that threatened to drown him and his men. Suddenly, a jolt rocked the Sturmpanzer. A piercing scream echoed through the tank as a shell detonated nearby, stunning the crew. Brandt steadied himself, scanning the area. "We're taking fire," he shouted, pushing the fears aside. The tank lurched forward again, but Brandt felt the weight of their situation. They were advancing but losing men. He thought of Himmler, still back there in the mud, and found a renewed determination. He yelled, and the crew nodded, even as chaos swirled around them. As they reached the front lines, Brandt saw the enemy scrambling, their defenses beginning to crack under the relentless assault. "Now is our chance." Brandt loaded another round, heart racing with the thrill of battle. The Sturmpanzer was a marvel of engineering, but it was the men inside that made it effective. At that moment, a deafening boom echoed, and Brandt's heart sank as he realized the source, a new weapon, a British artillery piece that had just spotted them. The ground shook violently as the shell struck nearby, throwing the tank off balance. Brandt gripped the sides, a feeling of dread creeping in. "We need to retreat," he shouted. But the commander glared at him, eyes fierce. "We push forward. We cannot get in." With every ounce of strength, Brandt shouted, "We're losing men. We can sacrifice ourselves for glory." The argument hung thick in the air, but the battle outside continued to rage. Brandt felt the tension mounting, and the reality of their situation pressed heavily upon him. Just then, a voice crackled through the radio. "We need reinforcements at the northern flank. They're breaking through." It was the voice of their commanding officer, desperation lacing every word. Brandt's heart raced, every second counted. "Tank commander, we need to help them," Brandt urged, but the commander was resolute. "We stay, this is our fight." Brandt's mind raced. Would they really sacrifice themselves here when they could save their comrades? The answer seemed to come from deep within, fueled by memories of his childhood with Himmler and the dreams of a brighter future. He knew they had to make a decision that could alter the course of the battle. "Prepare to shift fire," he shouted, taking control. "We can provide cover for the men on the flank." The crew hesitated, but the urgency in his voice cut through their hesitation. The commander finally relented, his face a mask of determination. "We'll support the flank." As they pivoted the Sturmpanzer, Brandt's heart surged with hope. He could see the distant figures of their comrades, struggling under fire. He yelled, and the cannon fired once more, the sound echoing across the battlefield like a thunderclap. As shells rained down around them, Brandt felt a surge of purpose. Each explosion gave life to the belief that they could change the tide of this war. But as the smoke cleared, the chilling realization dawned on him: the battle was only just beginning. The innovations of war were not merely tools of destruction, they were the harbingers of a legacy that would echo through the ages. With fierce resolve, Brant aimed the cannon. Just as he pulled the trigger, a shadow loomed over the battlefield. A squadron of Allied aircraft swooped down from the sky, dropping their payload of destruction upon the very ground they fought to claim. The familiar roar of engines filled the air, mingling with the cries of men. "Get down," he yelled, but the weight of history pressed down upon them. The innovations of warfare were spiraling into chaos. Would they withstand this storm, or would they crumble under the relentless pressure of fate? The answer loomed heavy in the air as the battle continued to unfold, a story woven with the threads of humanity, innovation, and an uncertain destiny. Brant knew the fight was far from over, and as he braced himself for the onslaught, the stage was set for the next chapter, a chapter that would take them far beyond the fields of France, into the very heart of a world in turmoil. The roar of the aircraft engines filled the sky as the Allied planes swooped down, their silhouettes stark against the fading light. Corporal Wilhelm Brandt's heart raced as he crouched inside the Sturmpanzer, the vibrations of gunfire rattling through him. He could feel the tension in the air, the unrelenting fear that gripped the men around him. The innovations of war, once a source of hope and strength, now felt like a double-edged sword, threatening to consume them in a storm of destruction. The tank commander shouted, and Brant felt the weight of his words settle heavily upon his shoulders. He glanced at the crew, their faces lined with fear and determination. Memories of laughter and warmth from his childhood with Private Hans Emmerle flickered in and out of focus, a stark contrast to the bleak reality of battle. Brant pressed his hand against the metal surface, his mind racing with strategies and a desperate need to protect his friend. Planes roared overhead, a symphony of death as they unleashed their payloads onto the battlefield. Explosions rocked the ground, sending plumes of dirt and debris into the air. Brant could see the devastation unfolding outside, men sprinting for cover, the cries of the wounded rising like a haunting refrain. It was a scene that would be etched into his memory, forever haunting him long after the war had ended. "Keep firing, we need to create a barrier," Brant shouted, his voice rising above the chaos. The tank's cannon boomed in response, sending shells bursting into the skies, attempting to intercept the enemy planes. The commander rallied the crew, urging them to work as one, each shot fired a testament to their resolve. Brant felt the pulse of adrenaline surge within him as they retaliated, fueled by the hope that they could protect their brothers on the ground. But as the engines roared and the skies darkened, Brant's mind swelled with uncertainty. What would become of their innovations? Would they claim victory, or would the tide of battle sweep them away? As each explosion rattled the tank, his thoughts drifted toward the future, the world beyond the battlefield, nations intertwined in a fragile peace that seemed so far away. "Wilhelm, look out!" shouted one of the crew, pulling Brant from his reverie. He quickly ducked as a British shell struck nearby, the shockwave rattling the Sturmpanzer. Dust and smoke filled the air, obscuring their view of the battlefield. In that moment of chaos, Brant felt a surge of desperation. They had to push through, they had to hold fast against the onslaught. "Change position, we need to reposition to the northern flank," the tank commander barked, eyes wild with determination. Brant nodded, moving quickly to reload the cannon. As they maneuvered, the tank lurched forward, and Brant felt the familiar thrill of battle course through him. The Sturmpanzer was a glimpse of the future, a mechanical beast forged from innovation and resilience. Outside, the enemy forces regrouped, preparing for a counteroffensive. The battlefield was a swirling mass of chaos, but amid the turmoil, Brant's resolve deepened. He thought of Emmerle still waiting for help. They had fought together for so long, he could not abandon him now. With every ounce of strength, he focused on the task at hand, each shot fired an echo of hope. "Steady, boys, we break through their lines," the commander urged, the energy palpable inside the tank. Brant felt the weight of their shared determination. They could not let fear dictate the outcome. Each round fired was a desperate plea for survival, a testament to their unwillingness to yield to the horrors of war. "Get ready. We be pushing through," shouted the commander, and Brant could see the enemy positions crumbling slightly ahead. The Sturmpanzer surged forward, a mechanical juggernaut, crushing everything in its path. But just as they gained momentum, a blinding flash erupted as a British tank appeared on the horizon, its menacing form silhouetted against the smoke-filled sky. "Not now," Brant screamed, adrenaline flooding his veins. He quickly raised the cannon, aiming carefully as the British tank fired first, a shell whistling past them. The impact sent vibrations rattling through their tank, and Brant cursed under his breath. They needed to outmaneuver their opponent. They needed to strike before the enemy could regroup. The commander shouted, and Brad pulled the trigger. The shell soared through the air, striking the British tank head-on, a brilliant explosion consuming it in flames. Cheers erupted inside the Sturmpanzer, but the victory was short-lived. Another British tank emerged, its cannon primed and ready, and Brad felt the air thicken with tension. "Look out," one of the crew shouted again. A massive explosion rocked their tank, sending them careening to the side. The sound of metal grinding against metal drowned out their cries, and Brant felt his world tilt. He clung to the cool metal, desperate to remain upright. "Regain control. We can't let them break us," the commander yelled. Brant fought through the chaos, determination igniting his spirit. They had to regain their footing, had to push back against the tide. As the Sturmpanzer steadied itself, Brant took a deep breath, the acrid smoke swirling around him, clinging to his lungs. "Willard, we have to fire again," he shouted, urgency propelling him forward. The crew scrambled to respond, their faces reflecting a mix of fear and unwavering camaraderie. With each shell loaded, Brant felt the weight of their journey coalescing. In that moment, they were fighting for more than just survival. They were fighting for a legacy that transcended the battlefield. With the Sturmpanzer stabilizing, Brant took aim once more. He could feel the tension in the air, the palpable energy of the battle surrounding them. He released a deep breath, focusing on the target ahead. Another British tank, its silhouette stark against the smoke. As he pulled the trigger, the cannon roared, and a shell erupted forth, finding its mark. The explosion sent shockwaves through the air, and Brant felt a sense of triumph wash over him. But just as hope surged, a voice crackled through the radio, cutting through the din of battle. "Schreiber, we're falling back. The Allies have breached our lines at the north. We need all tanks to regroup." Panic surged within him. Would their innovations be rendered useless in the face of such overwhelming odds? Brad exchanged glances with the crew, and he could see the fear mirrored in his own eyes. They were standing on the precipice of history. The fate of their nation hung in the balance. "Commander, we need to move," Brant urged, his voice a frantic whisper. The commander nodded, his determination unwavering. "We'll not leave anyone behind. We fight until the end." As they shifted gears, the Sturmpanzer lurched forward, the ground trembling beneath its weight. Brant felt the energy of battle surge within him, a powerful force propelling them onward. The Sturmpanzer was more than just a machine. It was a symbol of their resolve, a harbinger of innovation carved from desperation and hope. But amid the chaos, a chilling realization dawned upon Brant. Would their innovations truly save them, or were they simply prolonging the inevitable? The weight of warfare pressed down upon him, a dark cloud of uncertainty that hung in the air. The battles fought on this soil would ripple through history, intertwining the fates of nations and shaping the world to come. As the Sturmpanzer pushed through the fray, Brant felt a surge of purpose ignite within him. They were not merely soldiers, they were architects of their destiny, shaped by the innovations they wielded. But as the cries of battle echoed around them, Brant understood the harsh truth: every innovation came with a price, and history would judge their choices in the fires of conflict. With each passing moment, the battlefield transformed around him. The fight was far from over, and the specter of defeat loomed large. Brant knew they were on the brink of a new chapter, one that would take them beyond the fields of France, into the heart of a world forever altered by war. The night was dark, but within that darkness lay the flicker of hope, a chance for redemption that beckoned them forward. The battle had only begun, and the true test of their innovations awaited them in the shadowy depths ahead. Each moment teetered on the edge of chaos, a reminder that history was being forged in fires of conflict. What lay beyond the horizon would determine not only their fate, but the very fate of nations, a tapestry woven from the threads of war, legacy, and the unbreakable will to survive. With a newfound determination, Brant braced himself for the next clash, ready to face whatever came next, a legacy yet to be written, a story that would echo through the ages. The ground trembled beneath the Sturmpanzer as it pushed forward, wielding the fury of innovation against the advancing Allied forces. Corporal Wilhelm Brant could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, the weight of history pressing down upon him like a storm. The chaos of battle surrounded him, the cries of men and the roar of artillery mingling in a macabre symphony that spoke of desperation and hope. As they barreled through the remnants of the battlefield, Brant's thoughts flickered to Private Hans Emmeler, still pinned down and injured. He could visualize Emmeler's face, pale yet resolute, urging him to fight on. The bond they shared transcended the horrors of war, and Brant knew he could not let the innovations they fought for be in vain. "We were not leaving anyone behind," he shouted, rallying the crew as the tank lurched onward. The commander yelled, eyes fierce with determination. We regroup and push back. We can't falter now. The Sturmpanzer swerved sharply, dodging enemy fire as they reoriented toward the northern flank. Each round fired was a testament to their resolve, a vivid reminder that they were part of a larger narrative, one that intertwined the fates of nations from the trenches of France to the looming spectre of conflict across the Atlantic. As they approached the northern end of the battlefield, Brandt saw the chaos unfold before them. German soldiers were struggling to maintain their positions, the Allies gaining ground with a ferocity that sent waves of fear rippling through the ranks. The sound of gunfire intensified, blending with the anguished cries of the wounded, each sound a haunting reminder of the stakes at play. Focus fire on that machine gun nest, Brandt shouted, pointing toward a fortified position that threatened to obliterate their own lines. The crew sprang into action, loading shells and preparing for the assault. Brandt felt the pulse of history in every moment, the knowledge that they were fighting for more than just survival. They were fighting to uphold a legacy forged in innovation. The Sturmpanzer rattled as the cannon fired, the explosion marking a pivotal moment as the shell struck true, sending debris flying. "Keep it up," Brandt yelled, exhilaration igniting his spirit. But the thrill was short-lived. From the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of movement, a flanking maneuver by the British tanks. "Watch out," the commander bellowed, and Brandt's heart sank. A barrage of fire erupted, the ground shaking violently as explosions rocked their position. "We need to fall back. They're overwhelming us," Brandt cried, rising to his feet. "We can't retreat. Not now. We have to cover our men." He felt a surge of defiance, an unwillingness to let fear dictate their fate. The battle was a living entity, and within it lay the power to alter the course of history. "Hold the line, we were not giving ground," the commander shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Brandt felt the energy shift within the tank. Fueled by camaraderie and desperation, they prepared to unleash their firepower once more. As the cannon roared, the sound echoed like a battle cry, a testament to their defiance. The Sturmpanzer surged forward again, cutting through the remnants of the battlefield as Brandt aimed at the enemy tanks. Each shot fired was a ripple in the fabric of war, a reminder that they were part of something larger than themselves. But as their innovation met the might of the Allies, another realization dawned upon him: the cost of this war would leave scars that would last far beyond the battlefield. Brandt turned to see the line of German soldiers rallying, inspired by the Sturmpanzer's advance. They surged forward, encouraged by the sight of their own men fighting alongside the mechanical beast. The tide was shifting, the innovations of war were beginning to pay off. With renewed vigor, Brandt felt a sense of purpose swell within him. He could still see Imlala in his mind, the drive to protect his friend fueling his actions. "Charge, for hands," he shouted, and the crew echoed his rallying cry. The Sturmpanzer moved as if possessed, a fearsome juggernaut reclaiming its ground. The battlefield roared with renewed intensity as German forces regained their momentum, pushing back against the Allies. The cries of men mingled with the thunderous applause of artillery, echoing through the air like an anthem of resilience. But amidst the chaos, a sudden silence fell, a momentary pause in the storm. They were regrouping. Brandt could see the enemy forces reorganizing on the horizon, their tanks and infantry assembling for one final push. The weight of destiny hung thick in the air. This battle could either become a turning point or a catastrophic fall. The commander yelled, the gravity of the situation palpable. Brandt gripped the controls, feeling the energy of his comrades surge around him. They had come too far to back down now. The innovations they had fought for could not be lost in a moment of weakness. As the enemy tanks advanced, Brandt aimed the cannon. "Steady, wait for my mark." The tension was electric, anticipation hanging over them like a blade poised to strike. The Sturmpanzer stood ready, a symbol of hope and defiance, poised to unleash its final strength. Brandt shouted, and the cannon roared to life, unleashing a barrage of fire that ripped through the advancing enemy lines. The explosions erupted like fireworks, painting the battlefield with a vivid tapestry of chaos and destruction. But amidst the mayhem, Brandt felt a flicker of hope at night. "Push forward, we can hold them," the commander urged, and the crew rallied behind him, their resolve coalescing into a singular force. Brandt could see the glimmers of victory on the horizon as they pressed onward, each shot fired a testament to their refusal to yield. But as they neared the enemy, Brandt's heart sank once more as he heard the unmistakable sound of Allied artillery drawing near. The sky erupted in flames overhead, and he felt the vibrations of the ground beneath them shift. "Brace for impact," he yelled, instinctively gripping the tank's sides as explosions rained down. The Sturmpanzer rocked violently, and Brandt's determination faltered for a brief moment. But then, amidst the chaos, he thought of Emila, his friend who had fought bravely, who had inspired him to press on. The weight of their connection reignited his spirit. "We fight for one another. We fight for our future," Bran yelled, his voice rising above the din. The crew roared in acknowledgement, fueled by a sense of camaraderie that transcended the horrors of war. Together, they were not just soldiers, they were architects of their destiny, bound by the innovations they wielded and the sacrifices they made. As they surged forward, the Sturmpanzer unleashed a final volley, a deafening roar that echoed across the battlefield. The enemy forces faltered, and Bran could see the glimmers of victory shining through the smoke. The tide had shifted once more, their innovations had proven their worth. The Allies, overwhelmed and disorganized, began to retreat. The battlefield transformed before Bran's eyes, the grip of despair loosening as German forces rallied in response. With a final push, the Sturmpanzer broke through enemy lines, and as the dust settled, Bran felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had turned the tide, but the reality of war weighed heavily upon him. This victory, hard-won and bittersweet, came at a cost. As the last echoes of battle faded into the twilight, Bran took a deep breath, his heart heavy with thoughts of the fallen. The innovations of warfare had changed the landscape of conflict, but they had also left scars that would echo through history. In that moment, he understood the delicate balance of progress and destruction, the duality that defined humanity. Their fight was far from over. The specter of war loomed, and the innovations they embraced would continue to shape the fabric of their world. But amid the darkness, there was a glimmer of hope, a promise of resilience that would endure. The bond between men, forged in the fires of battle, would carry forward into the next chapter of history. As Bran looked out over the battlefield, the horizon glimmered with the promise of a new dawn, a dawn that would weave together the threads of nations, uniting them in a quest for peace amid the chaos of war. The Sturmpanzer stood as a testament not just to innovation, but to the unbreakable spirit of those who dared to dream of a brighter future. In the heart of Europe, the scars of war would remain, but so too would the legacy of resilience, a legacy that would endure through the ages.